Good afternoon, my friends. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you can hear me well. Okay, before we started, I would like to just take a moment whilst we're waiting for everyone to arrive. Um, Today we'll be talking to our chapter six, the spirit of truth. And before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Australia and recognize their continued connection to land, waters, and culture. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. And I would like to thank you, the Aboriginal spiritual community, for allowing and supporting the work we do here in Australia. That is really important. And before we start, I would like to ask everyone to elevate our thoughts. And for those who doesn't know, there are many ways to elevate our thoughts. And I'm just gonna use one very simple way, very simple example of to do that. Basically, I would like to ask right now that you elevate your thoughts by saying thank you, by using gratitude. So just look around you. Just look around you if there's someone sitting next to you, or look at your material things that you have. Um, Perhaps the flowers, plants, or whatever you have around you, friends, partners, kids, and just look around and say thank you. Just think about this and just say thank you, because that is one of the easiest way to elevate your thoughts. It's very easy and very helpful, right? And the other thing is you can try this everywhere, anywhere. It's very easily, right? And today we talk about the truth. And as you know, nowadays, to talk about the truth is very difficult because every time someone uses the word the truth, somebody might say that is fake news. As you know, there are famous people around the world, few politicians, especially one specifically who likes to say that everything is fake news. So when we talk about the truth, we have to think in a different way. So it helps us to understand what we're talking about. And considering we talk about the spirit of truth, I need to talk a little bit about Allan Kardec, the father of Spiritism. His name, Allan Kardec, his real name, it was Léon Hippolyte Denisard Rivaillot. I guess if he was here in Australia, they would call him Leon or Riva, yeah? But it's important that we understand a little bit about him, considering what we're talking about, because the subject is very important. Leon had a Bachelor of Arts degrees in science and doctorate in medicine. He was an educator, a professor. He was fluent in German, English, Italian, and Spanish, and of course, to the additional to the French, right? He was a member of several scholarly societies, including the Historic Institute of Paris, Society of Natural Science of France, Society of Encouragement of National Industry, and the Royal Academy of Arts. And for those who doesn't know anything about Allan Kardec, I would highly recommend that you watch it on Netflix, the movie Kardec. if someone could perhaps put the link there and people will be able to see. It's a great movie, gives a little bit of history about Allan Kardec. As a father of the Spiritism, he was the codifier of the Spiritism. Um, basically, with the teachings that he received from the higher spirits, he managed to write 5 books: the Spirit's Book, the Medium's Book, the Gospel According to Spiritism, Heaven and Hell, and the Genesis. But the work that he did was unbelievable. He wrote many other books. He was quite good. And considering this was 163 years ago, he started something new. And he had to change a few things in his private life to be able to do that. For example, for myself, I'm just talking about myself. I believe Spiritism is for people who are spiritual but not necessarily religious. It's for those who perhaps don't believe totally in the typical formal organized religions, the institutions, right? Um, I am spiritual. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I believe in connection, but don't necessarily believe on everything that has been done by the religious institutions, and that's okay. We respect that if you don't believe in religion, or but um, when we talk about the advent of the truth of the spirit of the truth, that's today's chapter, or basically the arrival of the spirit of truth, we have to talk about Allan Kardec. And it gives us, it makes us consider who he was and the work that he's done, and how that affects our lives today. And I'm just going to read a few things about the chapter that helps us to understand what it's all about. I'm going to read a little bit here. God consoles the humble and gives strength to the afflicted when they ask. His might covers the earth, and in every place, with each tear shed, he places a consoling remedy. Abnegation and resignation are a continuous prayer and contain profound teaching. Human wisdom resides in these two words. Spiritists love one another. That's the first precept. Educate yourself is the second. I find that very important, because the more we educate ourselves, the more we understand exactly what's happening around us, but most importantly, what's happening on the spiritual world. So we understand how we can connect, how we can improve the way we live here by connecting with the spiritual world in a very harmonious way. The, uh, the errors in which man has become rooted are all of human origin. Here, from beyond the grave, where you thought there was nothing, voices clamor, brothers and sisters, nothing perished. Jesus Christ is the victor of all evil. You can be the victors of impiety. The Spirit of Truth, 1860. So I just read a little bit about the Spirit of Truth, about the message received. And it's just for us to have an idea how this is so complex, because um, many people don't believe in reincarnation, and they don't believe that we can actually communicate with the spiritual world. So that there's two major complexities there. Um, the spirits have, the Spiritism teach us that there are three ways, three ages to communicate. And the first age was the age of the father, the stern but loving father. Stern means harsh but loving father. The age of the Son. Jesus revealed himself as the Son of God. And the age of the Spirit. This is the age that we're in, that we're starting. The age of the Spirit. God reveals himself via the Spirit of truth. We can tap in um, to that Spirit by the process called mediumship, where we learn how to communicate with the spiritual world. And before I continue into this, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Black Swan theory. I don't know if you probably have read the book. Um, it was a bestseller. And the Black Swan theory, it's the impact of highly improbable, hard to predict things. This was written by Professor Nassim Nicholas Taleb. It's quite interesting. And the story behind the theory is that in the 18th century, it was common Western belief that all swans were white, right? This was based on observations until then. In 1697, Willem de Vlamingh, a Dutch explorer, he discovered black swans here in Australia, and that changed everything. Even though some people thought that somebody was painting the white swans black, that wasn't the case. But basically, that has changed everything. And the Professor Nicholas Taleb wrote a theory about the black swan, and it's quite interesting. It's something that it it never happened until it happens. Something that uh, people don't give much attention until it happens. It illustrates our limitations and about excuse me, our limitations and observations and how we see things. The theory is a combination of mathematical and philosophical reasoning to explain and describe the randomness of uncertainty. The event generally has a major effect or is shocking in nature. This is for interest from affected or concerned groups to make changes to current practice in order to promote positive events and avoid negative events. And this makes me think about Allan Kardec's work, right? When Allan Kardec showed us that we could communicate with the spiritual world, he caused a major shock. That was a shocking event. Um, and also, it was a shocking because he combined mathematical and philosophical reasoning. Because he was professor, he studied everything. And that what made it very interesting because he wouldn't accept something, right? Um, Examples of a black swan. Computer was an example of a black swan. People knew about computers, but they didn't really give much attention when it started. Google was another black swan. Harry Potter book, few other religions, even a men's tie is an example of a black swan when people don't really think that somebody's gonna wear a tie, something attached to your neck, and then suddenly the whole world wear ties, right? For me, uh, uh, the most significant black swan that will focus today is the ability to communicate with the spiritual world. It's so robust and so important, right? That I have to explain a little bit about um, the work of Allan Kardec. So whoever's going to watch this in the future can see that the importance of his work and this how this will affect us from now on. And when we talk about the black swan theory, there are a few questions that the professor has put together that makes it interesting. The question number one, why do rare events affect history, science, finance, and technology? The answer, they occur with a low frequency. Hence, these events are not treated with a high regard in realms of where hypotheses are proven by highly frequent observations. So basically, back to Allan Kardec's work, people didn't believe what he was doing. They didn't believe this was a low frequency work. He started, and most of people, probably his colleagues and other professors, they just completely ignore his work. Right? Question number two, why are scientific methods insufficient at predicting these rare events? Black swan events can only be effectively predicted and prepared for by mathematical and philosophical reasoning. Because scientific methods show that if events have a low frequency of occurrence, they are disregarded. And again, Allan Kardec's work, when he was trying to explain that we could communicate with the spiritual world, that we could talk to them, have conversations, receive instructions from the spiritual world, nobody really gave much attention. It was just they probably thought he was going mad. Um, and again, I recommend you watch the movie Allan Kardec. Question number three, why are people unaware of the sizable role rare events play in history? And the answer is low frequency events, unless catastrophic, are rarely given high priority in historical records. Again, how interesting this is. If something is happening and it's not catastrophic, nobody cares. People forget it very quickly. It just comes and goes. And the work of Allan Kardec, when he was trying to show the world that we could communicate with the spiritual world, and he proved it scientifically. Um, Nobody really gave much attention because it was just one person. It was something small. He didn't have a lot of supporters. But most interesting, something really interesting happened that his work was brutally suppressed by the church. As soon as they thought this could be something big, his work was suppressed. And that became more interesting because that actually helped people because people wants to know as soon as the church suppressed his work, people wants to know what's going on. It was like uh, people felt interest in knowing what was all this about, right? The theory, the black swan theory, has three properties that is quite interesting. One is rarity. It was rare, something new. It was a surprise. So when Allan Kardec started to put the documentation together, when he studied the communication of the spiritual world, when he was writing the books, this was rare. Nobody knew. It was a surprise. And people suddenly start to read his books. They purchased his books, and everybody felt that, hey, I want to get this book. I want to understand how it's possible to communicate to the spiritual world. The other item that the theory, the property, the second property is the extreme impact. It affects how the entire system of communication in the spiritual world. The impact was that during that period, the Catholic Church control, dominate how they express the communication, how they taught us how to communicate to the spiritual world. And then suddenly a professor came and showed us another way to communicate to the spiritual world. He was he was risking his work, his um, his professional work by trying to do this. But it was amazing that it really worked. Um, the event had a major impact. People started to look at him in few different ways, some with respect and some didn't believe at all. The other impact that the third property was the retrospective predictability. Looking back at the event could have been expected to take place. If we look at back at when Allan Kardec was doing his work, do we think that we could expect that this was going to happen? I think so. I think that if it wasn't for him, somebody else was going to study a bit further. Somebody else would have the um, curiosity to figure out if it was possible to communicate with the spiritual world. And I think this was perfect. It was fantastic because instigate people to think about, to start consider possibilities because otherwise there was only one institution controlling the education. There was only one institution telling us this is how you communicate with the spiritual world. You have to follow our instructions. And suddenly we have something new. We have the work of Allan Kardec. And I believe, considering we talk about the truth, I believe it's really important that we analyze his work, especially if anyone that is listening to this don't believe in communication with the spiritual world. I recommend again, please watch the movie Allan Kardec, and that will help you to understand how it works. Right? We also need to consider that there is a hierarchy of spirits. It's not all spirits at the same level. And this helps us to realize that we can actually improve how we communicate so we can communicate in a better way and consequently having better results. For example, the highest rank are the pure spirits. They are sort of, they're nearly at perfection, right? The middle of the ladder are the ones that are working on it. They're sort of trying to reach the level of a pure spirits. And the third level are the imperfect spirits, who are still on the lower ranks of the ladder. We are the imperfect spirits. We are here to improve. We are here to um, improve how we do things. We want better. We want to do things better so we can improve the way we live. We want to communicate with spirits that have the experience. They have been here on earth before. They know exactly what we go through. And they are over there helping us. And that's what we do when we listen, when we read the books of Allan Kardec, when we try to pray, we try to elevate our thoughts, when we try to um, become better, improving morally and learning new things that will make us better people. That's basically what we're doing. And before, when we first started, I mentioned that one of the ways to elevate our thoughts, to elevate our energy, was gratitude, right? So we start being grateful. We start using the word gratitude. The second one that I would like to mention is love. We can express love more frequently. We can express generosity, right? We can be generous and also grateful. We can meditate and learn how to breathe. We don't know how to breathe, how to relax, and we need to learn that. We need to meditate more often. We also need to learn how to forgive. Forgive is so important because when we learn how to let it go, we remove the heavy loads from our shoulders. And by doing that, we actually are communicating with the spiritual world on that level, on the higher level, where we respect ourselves and we respect others as well. I know forgiveness is not easy, it's not straightforward, but it's there. The other thing is improving the way we eat, right? It's so important to eat organic fruits and vegetables, right? And leave aside a little bit of the processed food. This is extremely important so our body starts to work better. Right? Um, Reduce or eliminate alcohol and toxins from our body. I know we live in a society where alcohol is really important, especially during parties and major events, family events. You know, alcohol is it's always there. But we can try to minimize and reduce the amount of alcohol we drink and look at our body with a little bit more respect, just observing how our body reacts and drinking a little bit less or eliminating. That would be perhaps the best option. Thinking positive thoughts. How we think is so important, and what we think and how we let other people's thoughts and ideas affect us. Um, it's crucial that we observe our thoughts, and every time we think about something that is going to take us nowhere, we need to learn how to click and stop and think about something else. Again, being grateful. Being grateful for our things stop us from thinking negative thoughts. What about music? Music is so important when we listen to music that elevate our thoughts. Um, Music with positive soundtracks, positive lyrics, right? What about surrounding ourselves with beautiful people, positive people? Sometimes we need to observe who are our friends, you know. We need to observe our friends and respect them, but we need to respect ourselves as well and sometimes decide, I want to change my friends. I want to surround myself with positive people. And that's important. You're welcome to come to Paul Stephen Spiritist Center in the near future when it's open. And I can guarantee you, you'll be surrounded by very positive people. And that's why I always go there, because I want to be surrounded by very positive people. And all my friends, they're all very positive. um, Exercise. Exercise is so good. Going out, walking around, enjoying the fresh air, right? And the other thing is, I'm gonna read a sentence here from Eckhart Tolle. Everybody knows him. He said, realize deeply that the present moment is all you have. Make the now the primary focus of your life. Make it the now the primary focus of your life. This moment is this right moment is the most important thing that is happening in your life. Right now, there are no problems, there are no issues. Life is beautiful, everything is wonderful. By thinking like this and elevating our thoughts, I'd like to ask you all to tonight, before you go to bed, I would like you to please consider other ways to elevate your thoughts, other ways to think about communication with the spiritual world. I would like to ask you to observe how your family members communicate with the spiritual world and ask them. In case you don't believe, read a little bit more. Watch Allan Kardec's movie or read his books or many other books that are available. And I believe that we need to promote this because many people around the world right now are suffering. They feel lonely. They feel that they don't have support. They don't know how to communicate with the spiritual world. A lot of people don't believe on the available religious institutions anymore. So we need to help them. We need to help each other. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate and I really hope that somehow I have managed to help you guys to understand that we can communicate with the spiritual world in a much better way by looking at each other with respect, by helping each other, but most importantly, educating ourselves. Because when we educate ourselves, we understand why we need to do certain things in certain ways. So thank you again, and I hope you have a lovely long weekend. I love you guys, or how should I say here in Australia? I love you so. Thank you guys. Have a lovely weekend. Bye bye.